This series that I've been offering for satsang, this round on Kriya Yoga Living, I'm looking at 5 different qualities of the awakened heart, meaning heart and mind open to the truth of what we are. And I've been sharing this wonderful quote from Paramahansa Yogananda: by Kriya Yoga, one's consciousness functions on a higher plane. Devotion to the infinite spirit then arises spontaneously in one's heart. The heart's natural state of spiritual illumination reveals our innate divine qualities, such as the ones I've been speaking about: self restraint, humility, perseverance on the spiritual path, freedom from anger, and uprightness. And these are drawn, these list of qualities, and I've only picked a few, come from the list that we find in the Bhagavad Gita, the 16th chapter. There's teachings in the first 3 verses on that. And today I want to read to you from Eknath Ishwaran's version of the Gita, his translation, chapter 16, verses 1 through 5. Be fearless and pure. Never waver in your determination or your dedication to the spiritual life. Give freely. Be self-controlled, sincere, truthful, loving, and full of the desire to serve. Realize the truth of the scriptures. Learn to be detached and to take joy in renunciation. Do not get angry or harm any living creature, but be compassionate and gentle. Show goodwill to all. Cultivate vigor, patience, will, purity. Avoid malice and pride. Then, Arjuna, you will achieve your divine destiny. Other qualities, Arjuna, make a person more and more inhumane: hypocrisy, arrogance, conceit, anger, cruelty, and ignorance. The divine qualities lead to freedom, the demonic to bondage. But do not grieve, Arjuna. You were born with divine attributes. And of course, that message to Arjuna is a message to us all. So today's topic is freedom from anger is freedom to love. And as I looked at it this morning, I thought, oh, it really should say freedom from anger is freedom to be love, to be the divine instruments that we are. When we free ourselves from the stronghold of anger, we do gain access to the transforming graces of divine love, which is, of course, a far greater power than the lower drive of anger. I think it's probably fair to say that along with grief, anger has been a predominant emotion in this pandemic year. It surely has been on vivid display in our national politics in the United States. And I have to admit, I've seen more of it arising in my own mind. And I have talked with many people who are wondering, what's the best way to put the lid on their anger and to scale it down in their families. They notice the kids are fighting more than usual, or the kids are pushing back against parents, spouses are losing it with each other, and so on. And sometimes, of course, we don't experience or identify full-blown anger, but we might see signs of it, like frustration or negativity, complaining. So what do we do with anger? Some spiritual texts, like this translation of the Gita I just read, advise just don't get angry. So I've always been curious, well, how does that work? How do we prevent anger from taking over our hearts and our minds and causing us to think and say and do things we know are not consistent with our true nature? So yoga teachings offer us some wisdom for dealing with anger that is both lofty and practical. The lofty part of it advises us to simply abide in the soul's peace, in the soul's wholeness and stability. And when we're able to do that, then anger doesn't arise. There's a verse in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verse 70, that points to this. It says, "Be like the ocean, which becomes filled, yet remains unmoved and stands still even as the waters enter it." This is such a beautiful metaphor for how to deal with things coming at us and remaining stable. Be like the ocean, which becomes filled yet remains unmoved and stands still even as the waters enter it. So think about this metaphor. The major rivers, Amazon, Ganges, the Yangtze, the Nile, all flow into the ocean, and yet it remains stable. How does it do that? One simple observation is depth. Oceans are deep. So that's the first thing. And then also, they give up moisture to the clouds. So this is two delightful metaphoric teachings for us. One, be deep, be anchored in the depth of our essential nature. And that keeps us from overly reacting to surface matters. And we can also practice in our own way giving up, meaning working in harmony with the infinite, surrendering, letting go of clinging to our separate self agenda. It's our lack of depth perception and that pernicious clinging to what we want that allows anger to move in and stay with us too long, like a bad relative that won't leave. So we have to outwit anger. How do we get that cantankerous relative to move out? Well, sages would say, don't invite him in the first place. But once he's there, avoid entertaining him. Don't make it easy for him to stay. So I want to talk about 4 steps this morning for outwitting anger. Discern where it comes from, learn how to manage it, learn how to transform it, and 4th, find freedom from it. So discern where anger comes from. Well, most of the time it seems like it's caused by other people, but a little bit of discernment shows us that, of course, anger is arising in our own minds and nobody put it there but us. So the teachings tell us that anger comes from our attachments and thwarted desire. Going back to the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 62 and 63, says, when a person dwells on the objects of the senses, attachment to them is born. And from attachment comes desire. From desire, anger is born. So this is what it means. Anger is thwarted desire. It's what happens when we don't get what we want. And you can become a sleuth about anger. This is what we're doing in the first step. We're learning where it comes from, what causes it. Thwarted desire. Check it out for yourself. We understand anger as thwarted desire, we can see it would make a lot of sense why we would experience a rise of anger during the pandemic year, because we're not getting what we want. What do we want? We want freedom. We want safety. We want some semblance of control of our lives. We want the ability to do what we want to do when we want to do it. And those desires have been thwarted. So sometimes just discernment alone will begin to dismantle anger's power. When we feel angry, we can inquire, well, what do I want that's not happening here? What is the attachment behind that desire? And can I release that attachment? Second step is learning how to manage anger. So we practice discernment. Where is it coming from? What is it? And then we can learn how to manage it. Yoga philosophy teaches us that our ordinary mind is filled with, troubled by 6 main impurities: attachment, jealousy, meanness, anger, hate, and vengeance. These impurities cause the mind to be restless. And that restlessness caused by these impurities obscures our ability to meditate successfully or to reason clearly. So spiritual practice is for the purpose of clearing that up, removing those basic impurities that are common to human nature. The prescription, or one of the prescriptions given in Kriya Yoga to free the ordinary troubled mind of its impurities, is to introduce the medicine of virtuous qualities. We learn to substitute a soul quality for an ego-driven reaction. And there's a sutra for that practice in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, in the first chapter, the 33rd verse or sutra. The mind becomes serene by the cultivation of feelings of love for the happy, or sometimes it's friendliness, or love for the happy, compassion for the suffering, delight for the virtuous, and indifference toward the non-virtuous. So here's how those 4 scenarios work. We understand this practice is about making another choice. There's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction, that's the lower drive, and then we bring in the medicine of a virtuous behavior that can purify that mind. So when others are happy and successful, the knee-jerk reaction is often jealousy. Why them and why not me? How come they're getting that? How come they have that happiness and success and not me? This is the voice of the ego. So cultivating feelings of love and friendliness instead, and understanding that their happiness is our happiness too, calms the mind. Second, when others are suffering, we may instinctively want to distance ourselves out of fear or distaste. But cultivating compassion instead opens the heart and quiets the mind. Third, when we experience others who are virtuous, we might feel envious or even suspicious of them. So making a course correction to cultivate delight in the virtue of others removes the impurity of envy from our mind. And last of those 4, indifference or equanimity toward those who are misguided or non-virtuous frees us from the impurity of intolerance. So when the mind is thus purified, soul light can illuminate. Then discernment, innate peace, and happiness can prevail. So our third strategy is how to transform anger. The first 2 steps that I've mentioned today are foundational. So first, we discern where anger is coming from, how it arises in the mind by seeing what it's attached to, and what desire is thwarted, and what the attachment is behind that. Then we learn how to manage it, how to nullify its strength by introducing a virtuous quality, cultivating the opposite. Then, when we've done that, we can use the energy of the anger and apply it for a useful purpose. We can transform that energy, but we can't transform that energy when we're overtaken by it. So first we have to deconstruct the anger through discernment And then we have to apply the proper remedy, and then we can use the energy constructively. Anger is fueled by rajas guna, or restless desire. And then we can take that restless energy and put it into constructive action. We can ask ourselves, what do I want that's being thwarted? And then we're free to examine, what do I really want? Like under that, what do I really want? And when we sincerely ask that question, what do I really want? We're right on the threshold of freedom to love. And as I said in the beginning, freedom to be love. And that's my last point, which is finding freedom from anger. When we work with anger, we first ask, what do I want here? What's missing? And then we can dive deeper by asking ourselves, well, what do I have? In the highest sense, what do I always have? Who or what am I? And really importantly, in our work with anger, we ask ourselves, who do I want to be? I want to leave the concluding teachings this morning to Rumi, a beautiful lesson on anger. And I'm going to be reading from the Essential Rumi, translations by Coleman Barks with John Moyne. And this particular poem is called Ali in Battle. Starts out, learn from Ali how to fight without your ego participating. God's lion, this Ali, God's lion did nothing that didn't originate from his deep center. Once in battle, he got the best of a certain knight and quickly drew his sword. The man, helpless on the ground, spat in Ali's face. Then Ali dropped his sword, relaxed, and helped the man to his feet. Why have you spared me? How has lightning contracted back into its cloud? Speak, my prince, so that my soul can begin to stir in me like an embryo. Ali was quiet and then finally answered, I am God's lion, not the lion of passion. I am God's lion, not the lion of passion. The sun is my Lord. I have no longing except for the one. When a wind of personal reaction comes, I do not go along with it. There are many winds full of anger and lust and greed. They move the rubbish around, but the solid mountain of our true nature stays where it's always been. There's nothing now except the divine qualities come through the opening into me. And may it be so with all of us. May we be God's lion and not the lion of passion. Surely the key to freedom. Om.